My first reading response is inspired by Saidiya Hartman's book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Intimate Histories of Social Upheaval. I am drawn to her poetic and descriptive writing that engages all of the senses and immerses me into the scene as if I was watching a cinematic movie. Hartman pays attention to the intimate details as she expands upon the lives of Black women whose stories were often overlooked by the archive. She gives these characters agency and hope even in times of poverty, objectification, and surveillance. From this text, I wanted to play with fiction and critical fabulation by writing from the perspective of my late grandmother Katie. The yellow house on the corner. You can find her sitting on her porch in the middle of a sunny afternoon with an umbrella in one hand and a Pepsi in the other. Though she can't hear the cars go by or the sound of children playing on the streets, it doesn't matter. She feels the breeze against her cheek and waves to the neighbors that pass by on their daily stroll. She enjoys the quiet. She has gotten used to the quiet. Though she admits that she can be stubborn at times, Katie cherishes her independence. Tilting back her umbrella, she looks up to admire the yellow vinyl siding on her house. Some people may say it's faded and needs a paint job, but she doesn't care. It has perfectly aged, just like her. She squints her eyes to observe the chokecherry tree that has stood the test of time through thick and thin. Was this planted by my parents? Her memory is getting blurrier these days, but that's what happens when you hit 86. Her gaze goes past the tree and lingers on the brown house across the street. A small smile starts to form on her lips. To think that's where Gunnar grew up. Who knew that the love of your life would live right across the street from you? Getting ready for the grandchildren. As the sun began to retreat from her skin, she could feel the hairs on her arms start to lift and a cooler breeze ruffle through her clothes. It was time to go in. She opened the squeaky screen door and set the umbrella next to the felt coats and muted jackets hanging up. Even though it is summer, she would always be ready for whichever season that arrived on her doorstep. She walks into the kitchen, sets her empty Pepsi can on the table, and takes a moment to look around. She could hardly see the lime green paint behind all the pictures, newspaper clippings, and birthday cards collaged on the walls with masking tape. The time on the clock catches her attention as she realizes that she has to make supper and get things ready for her grandkids before heading off to church. While waiting for her canned peas to boil, she puts some extra Pepsi and 7-Up in the fridge and sorts the chocolate bars on the table. Let's see, Matthew and Daniel like Mars bars, Hope loves Reese's Pieces, and Samantha likes Milky Way. Yet Katie couldn't say that chocolate bars are her favorite. While staring down at her same old dinner, she sighs and thinks to herself, I wonder when Dan will make me another cheesecake. Everybody has a spot. Katie is never late to Mass. She walks in her own pace while heading towards St. Gregory's around the block. Being raised Catholic by 2 Croatian parents was all her and her 4 other siblings had ever known. The dark brown brick exterior of the parish shows tradition, and Katie isn't too fussy about change. While climbing up the steps that seemed like the umpteenth time, she suddenly thought, I have to get my spot. As if anyone would think about taking Catherine Sandvik's seat in Mass, God bless them. Like the cool kid in class, she sits in the back row on the right-hand side of the dimly lit church. She sees her kids and grandchildren sitting together in a pew closer to the front. Though she would probably hear the priest better if she were to sit with her family, she still stayed put. It wasn't even her church friends that made her want to stay in the same pew. It was tradition. This was her spot. After the liturgy ends, Katie swiftly exits out of the church and began to walk home. Even though they offer to drive me back every time, they know that I'm faster than any car. They don't call me the road runner for nothing. Family first. Less than a few minutes after I step through the door, 2 cars pull up in the driveway. My family, my world has just arrived. That's what makes this my favorite time of the week, when we're all together again. The grandkids come in first, and we bump heads as usual. I let the parents settle down into the chairs around the kitchen table. As I see the kids looking to dive into their treats, I tell them to go climb up the ladder. Each of them go to their specific spots to find a plastic bag that has coins and dollar bills equaled to their exact ages. Every year the number changes, and every year I wanted to slow down. As the kids watch TV and eat their chocolates, the parents always fuss that they haven't eaten supper yet. I cross my arms, laugh, and say, "Dessert comes first." Sin, Dan, Susie, and Philip try to speak loudly to me, but they know that my hearing is getting worse and that I do not want to talk about this thing called a hearing aid. If I can't make out what they say, I simply just reply with, "Isn't that nice?" I'm sure they don't mind. But as I see the sunset turn to black and the parents glance at their watches, my heart sinks just a little, knowing that I have to say goodbye again. After bumping heads one last time with my grandkids and adding a few things to my daughter's grocery list, I finally let them go out the door. Standing in my usual spot at the small window in the entryway, I pull back the curtain to take one last look at them. Though I can't hear their cars honk or their voices shout, "Bye, Grandma," I see their faces and their hands waving towards me. And I'll always be here, waving back at you, waving at the window on Wallace Terrace. My ancestry is my archive. Finding a trace. If only we could stumble upon the right archive, the secrets that no one else had yet discovered, we might still be one of the chosen ones. Julietta, Singh. We are all made of loose threads. Some are tightly knotted, others detangle over time, and there are a few that unravel and can never be tied together again. We often forget that histories are more than just the facts. They are made up of people. While searching for their unique purpose on the same earth, their paths may cross as their lives twist and turn in unexpected ways. Call it what you will, fate, God, or a stroke of luck, our stories are shaped by one another's currents. Every body is a repository of memories. Quote, "an endless collection of oneself that is impossible to gather," end of quote. Connected through time and space, our bodies are vessels that hold the thoughts, emotions, and personalities of those who came before us. Quote, "in the end, we are not bounded, contained subjects, but ones filled with foreign feelings and vibes that linger and circulate in space, that enter us as we move through our lives." End of quote. Genealogies are like buried treasures hidden in the sands of time, a mystery waiting to be excavated. Yet, how do we reconcile with people, places, and things that are no longer traceable? Though the what-ifs and could-have-beens follow our footsteps, how exciting it is to realize that our stories are not yet stitched into the chronicles of history. To be alive in this single solitary moment without knowing how our story will unfold. Before someone hurries to write the future, perhaps we can first look back and see what's been left behind. Genealogies are like constellations. which basically means that you are endlessly looking where to connect the dots. After hours of searching, Dan had finally reached his limit. Leaning over his computer screen for a while now, he finally sat back in his chair and let out a sigh. Taking off his glasses, he rubbed his eyes and looked out the kitchen window to see his backyard. Fall always looks so beautiful this time of year, especially now that the maple tree was finally starting to turn that bright red he always loved. With a slight hesitation, he turned back to his computer and circled his cursor around the names branching off from his father's family tree on Ancestry.ca. What is with today? He thought to himself. No matter how many marriage, birth, and census records he checked, the search for his grandfather's roots kept coming up dry. Just the other day, he had a major breakthrough with his grandmother's line, as one click led to another click, which led to a duke. Pause. Then click, which led to King Louis I? How could this be possible? Joy and wonder suddenly rushed through him as he called his family over to show them this exciting new discovery. But as his eyes stayed fixed on that name, he knew that he would need access to international records to confirm that his royal lineage to the House of Bourbon was legitimate. Plus, if there was a secret inheritance waiting for the Lance family somewhere in France, he needed to know. Shaking himself back to the present moment with a little chuckle, Dan looked back at the empty slots within Prepare's family tree. His fingers hovered over his keyboard. Perhaps it's time to call it a day. He exited out of Ancestry, turned off his computer, and ventured into the living room. He settled into his corner on the couch and opened up Wordle on his tablet. Dan would play the other game again tomorrow because there would eventually be a stroke of luck. It was only a matter of time. Now where did I put it? Cindy said to herself while opening up another bin filled with photo albums, loose papers, and old calendars from the early 2000s. She looked around at her laundry area, overflowing with nothing but the word miscellaneous to describe it. One of these days I'm going to have to organize all of this. Then she remembered that it could be in her bedroom dresser. She hurried up the stairs, opened her armoire, and lo and behold, there it was. That blue binder containing all of her father's letters when he served in the RCAF during the Second World War. She pulled it from the shelf, sat on the edge of the bed, and held her breath while opening the flap. It had been years since she had put time aside to thoroughly read her father's words to his parents and to the men that he had formed friendships with while being a part of the Lancaster bomber crew or the Caterpillar Club. What it must have been like to be drafted at the age of 21. As Cindy carefully pulled out each postcard and letter, a whiff of that antique smell escaped from the protective sleeve, and she took a second to feel the chalky paper rub against her fingertips. As she began to read the small cursive writing, time seemed to stand still, and she could only hear Sandy's voice. She could hear his frustration. This place is getting me down. I thought the weather was bad over here in autumn, but this place has got it beat. Mud, mud, mud. That's all there is. February 23rd, 1944. She could hear his reassurance. I have a very good crew, Mom. One of the best, I think. Sometimes we get a little out of hand and fed up, but we are still on the go. August 10th, 1944. She could hear him trying to stay hopeful despite the odds. You know how I loved Jim. He was the greatest pal and truest friend a person ever had. He didn't go. He still lives. With me. On every trip he'll be with me. I feel that we too will be back to the best families and friends there ever will be. I be home safe and sound to marry the sweetest girl in the world. July 23rd, 1944. And she could feel the love that he had for his family. Yes, I have the best family, best friends, and my best girl, I hope. August 10th, 1944. Reaching up to readjust her glasses, Cindy felt a faint wetness on her cheek. She looked down at the letters with a new sadness and closed her eyes. If only he was here today. He would have gone to all of Matthew's hockey games, Daniel's theater plays, and Samantha's dance recitals. But maybe he was watching, just from a different point of view. Opening her eyes, Cindy slid the letters back into their designated spots and closed the binder. She got up from the bed, opened the dresser, and placed the memory back on the shelf. At least they have this, she said to herself. At least they have Grandpa's story.